And I already got the information that our next speaker is here, so it's a pleasure to introduce Röhm from Apheris. His talk is titled Beyond MLOps, How Federated MLOps Unlocks the Next Frontier of AI Innovation. Röhm is the co-founder and CEO of Apheris, a platform for federated and privacy-preserving data science on sensitive data, and he has a diverse academic background in mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. What an interesting combination. So thanks for being on stage, for joining BOSS 22, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And what I'm talking about today is a topic that is close to my heart, which is the next frontier of innovation when it comes to machine learning operations. We called the title of this talk, Beyond MLOps, How Federated Machine Learning Operations Unlocks the Next Frontier of AI Innovation. And what I will be speaking about today is in particular how we are seeing a trend in the market of digitally mature organizations that are starting to think of more integrated ways to unlock value from data that spans across organizational boundaries. And so would love to give you some insights into that today. What we are seeing is that over the last couple of years, large enterprises have spent millions on operationalizing data and AI pipelines, and primarily on, let's say, infrastructure that are coupled to setups where you have rights to analyze directly and access such data. So the talk we just looked at has been an example of that. And I think some of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the world have arisen through that trend, Databricks being one example, but similarly the offerings from the large hyperscalers or as well Snowflake. And all of the success of those companies really have been built upon a movement that we could as well recognize in the machine learning space, which is what we call data-centric AI. And that is the idea that, in fact, the way you manage the data pipelines that then feed into your machine learning models, and as well how you deploy those and build up iterative feedback loops, that those this preparation and how you actually operationalize that is really the most important thing in bringing machine learning to production. And so, those platforms that we could call data platforms or as well machine learning operations platforms really achieved a change in paradigm in large enterprises, where we could see that projects that increase their success rate, where we have higher reproducibility from applications that are being built up and that entail machine learning at its core, that there's as well a better line of communication between technical teams and non-technical teams, and ultimately that the innovation cycles increase more quickly. Now, when we look at that and look at digitally mature companies and their data science teams, what their key bottlenecks are today, it's often that access to the right data is really missing. And again, that makes a lot of sense if you're thinking around the concept of data-centric AI. If data is the key thing you want to prepare and really operationalize, then access to such data is absolutely key. And what many companies recognize is that the internal data sets that they own and where they have the rights and as well the understanding of how they've been captured, that those are insufficient for training robust and business value generating AI models. And so key things that happen here is that you are operating on incomplete data sets. So in particular, and I think that's the biggest challenge we are seeing in industries, is that the data that you're using for training and building AI applications do not really represent the full value chain of what you're trying to operationalize. So concrete examples, take for example a customer journey, right? Often there's data that is being captured before that customer enters what you as an organization can really capture, and then afterwards as well those customers proceed with doing different things. Similarly, when we look into healthcare, a patient journey, typically there's multiple organizations that capture data from such a patient, and so gaining a view on that entire patient journey is really incredibly difficult. Or even in manufacturing, if you think about production, a value chain. So if you want to optimize a given value chain, increase the sustainability, you need to enable that data is being used across organizational boundaries. But again, this is not an option as each party is operating on their own. Often we see as well that the quality of the data set is simply too low, that there are biases in the data itself, that they are not diverse enough. And that makes sense because a given company is investing into capturing data with their systems, with their business models. And so naturally you are focusing on a certain aspect, but adding third-party complementary data would really be valuable. And most importantly, I think we all know that the size of the data really enables good AI applications. And so here again, the costs of capturing data are massive for enterprise organizations. So one trend that we're seeing is that more and more companies are building what we call collaborative data ecosystems. And what we mean by collaborative data ecosystems is really when multiple organizations start coming together and sharing and managing data in compliance with their local regulations and guidelines. So what that means is not a point-in-point data sharing activity, but it's really that that companies are thinking about better ways in terms of how to make use of their data in line with processes that other organizations have set up. So it typically spans across multiple data sets and data sources and ultimately leads to multiple data applications that are being built on such complementary data of multiple parties. And this trend around collaborative data ecosystem is really large. So here's statistics from a study Capgemini has done that 75% of large enterprise organizations are investing 10 million into data ecosystems in the next 2 years, 25% even beyond 50 million. So really a massive category that is here on the rise. And the financial projected benefits are as well up to 9% of the total revenue of large enterprise organizations. So this really is something that will transform the way we think about data and AI. Now, what is actually important when you're thinking of collaborative data ecosystems and how to make them successful? There are few cases where direct data sharing is an option, but often, as we know that data is both commercially valuable and often regulated, this is not the case, and that has been as well the key blocker in terms of why API-led approaches have not led to a transformation in building up collaborative data ecosystems. What we recognize is that in order to let's say, build the right commercial incentives for organizations to build up, participate, or launch such collaborative data ecosystems, we need to find ways to operationalize AI applications without diminishing the value of the data sets that those companies own. Obviously, the data sets that they capture is their intellectual property and builds up their competitive edges. And so direct sharing of data would diminish that value. And so that's why companies are not doing that. And the regulatory hurdle, everyone who works with data that is regulated, I think everyone knows, just giving access to an aggregated data set is a pain. It takes a lot of time, legal costs involved. So really finding ways to do that in a manner that respects those commercial interests is key. And so one key approach goes in line with a trend that we're seeing across many things around data, which is decentralization. So that's the idea that you keep data where it currently resides, you don't move the data, but instead what you can build up is ways to send computation requests to where the data currently resides. So I know there are people in the audience that work with federated learning, so that's one of the key concepts that you can do. But really what we mean by here is much broader, that goes beyond a machine learning application that is sent to one specific instance and being trained there, but rather the way of how can you provision data to a third-party company in a way that protects your integrity, but still allows the type of computations you want to throw at it as you are analyzing it, so as you're doing data science. So that spans the entire data science journey from pre-processing pipelines to statistics or analytics to machine learning models or as well evaluations. So that's a key thing, and I think there's such federated architectures are something that we are seeing in many industries, and in particular in the most regulated ones. There are a couple of privacy techniques that are as well becoming more and more present in an enterprise context. So the cryptographic approaches, homomorphic encryption or secure multi-party computations for those that are more into it, but as well statistical privacy techniques, differential privacy. But similarly, when we look at security, often concepts here are combined. What I want to point out here is, and that's why I named this federated machine learning operations. Key for making this successful is that you're combining different approaches and building up governance around certain processes that allow you to provision data in a way that protects the privacy and intellectual property of your data, while still enabling integrated ways to compute on it. And there are lots of tools that work together that and come together, and that's essentially things that we've been seeing when the machine learning operations platforms have been brought to market, that initially there was a focus on easy usability, but then more and more you started to integrate lots of different tools, really integrate that into the given tech stack. And that's essentially a combination that organizations need to look at when they are today thinking about how to make use of their data and as well involve third-party data into their own data science practices. I want to give some examples just to make it a bit more practical, where we are seeing such collaborative data ecosystems on the rise. So one of the examples is obviously the healthcare and pharma sector. So for example, Apheris is a company that provides such a platform for collaborative data ecosystems, and one of the use cases that we are currently building up with a top 10 pharma client is a disease-specific collaborative data ecosystem. So what that means is that hospitals around the globe are provisioning data in the same manner to the other participants in such a consortia, such that new data applications can be built on that. And what is really interesting is that there are, for the first time, really commercial interests for those parties to capture and describe data in the same manner. So that means that all of those hospitals that have their own processes, their own governance in terms of deciding how to analyze data, start thinking about how can we do so collaboratively, how can we use the same data models, the same data standards, and as well standards for provisioning access to our data that we've been capturing in a way that is meaningful for all. And that ultimately for the other side, for example, the pharma company, really builds out market access because they are owning IP, and now that there's a network with processes in place where data is being captured in the same manner, where data models are aligned, they're opening up new ways to commercialize their existing assets. And so that's an example where a collaborative data ecosystem is really a foundation for new businesses, new ways to think about data value, and new ways to unlock insights from such data. Different example is in manufacturing. Value chain collaboration, I think, is an obvious one. So as you're thinking about value chain, there's a regulatory driver for many value chains to increase the sustainability. And in order to do that, you need to share data or collectively analyze it, so that's process data, quality data, to spot anomalies. And so one collaborative data ecosystem that we are building up is along an entire value chain where organizations, starting from a chemical manufacturer up until to the OEM and the parties in between, are leveraging their data, their process and quality data. And here again, the key value is that there's an alignment along that value chain, and that you can build commercial incentives for those different participants to really align how they are using data, how they're describing it, and that enables new data applications that are being built, and that can ultimately yield value for every participant. Fraud detection is a different one in finance, and I'll not go into detail to make sure I touch upon other aspects. So one key thing that really is necessary as you are building, participating or launching a collaborative data ecosystem, that there's quite a change in the way organizations need to think about data and data value. And that makes sense in particular as the business models that are present here are by nature ecosystem business models. And so the way you're thinking about how to commercialize that, how to secure your competitive edge, is quite different in terms of comparing that to a world where you are doing that for internal purposes. So really trying to understand what that complementary data value is and what your interest, both as a company, both in securing your competitive edge and leveraging your IP, but as well in enabling value for the other participants. That's a key aspect, and I think many companies have started that journey as we are operating in a world where more and more ecosystems are present. And that ultimately leads to a different operating model. That's what I meant with when I said that how data is being described and captured changes, and that obviously changes as well as you're building up your internal data practices, that the way you think about, let's say, incorporating them within your own practices need to change, and that is a key trend that we are seeing for those that are really advancing in this category. So my time is almost up, so I'll keep it short. We do see that this is an early market, so we call that federated machine learning operations for a more technical stakeholders, collaborative data ecosystems in terms of what value it provides. And some of the use cases and some of the largest challenges we are working on need that. Let's say that complementary data value being unlocked, sustainability, curing diseases are just prominent examples. And so, if that's interesting for you, reach out to me. Here's my mail and as well our website. And I'm up with my time, so not sure if we have time for questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robin. We indeed have a couple of minutes left for questions. So if there are questions from the audience, I'll just quickly David, front row. Thank you.
Thank you. Carsten Ulrich. So there are some initiatives on the European level, like the European health data space, to force players to share the data. Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think they will share the data anyway without being forced?
Fantastic question. So there are definitely, let's say, initiatives, European Health Data Space, Gaia X, Catena X, like all of those that are pushed from a regulatory trial. What I do believe that is absolutely necessary is that we have certain, let's say, rules and procedures in terms of how to provision data, and in particular, big value we do see in as well initiatives where data models are being built, and I think often those go along with each other. We ultimately believe that let's say, the way you are forming bonds in terms of who to collaborate with, under which circumstances, that this needs to be specific to the different organizations, and they need to have a certain flexibility in doing that. Otherwise, the commercial incentives that a company has cannot be fully leveraged. And I think you will know better than most people in here that the data value that a company owns is their key competitive edge. And as such, you are, as an organization, you're really thinking about where do I participate, who do I provide access to such data, under which circumstances. And I think most of the initiatives that we are seeing, we don't think that this, let's say, granularity and this ability to define your commercial interest as a company is really granular enough. And that's why often those initiatives, let's say, don't scale and have the necessary impact as quickly as possible. But I do believe, and I value very much, that they find certain use cases where maybe all participants should have the same interest, and then as well make sure that data is being used collectively, and that certainly opens up as well the understanding of what you can do, what impact you can have with such initiatives. So that would be my answer to it.
Thank you very much, Robin. With that, our time is up. So thanks again for your presentation.